All right, Minnesota Wild, let's talk about it. Brock Faber, is he already the number one defenseman on this Minnesota Wild group? He has played elite defensively. He's stepping into the offensive zone. He's a great skater. He's showing some intangibles, some leadership. I'm calling it right now. It is October 18th, 2023. Brock Faber's played 5 regular season games. He will be the next captain of the Minnesota Wild, which is crazy. It's a crazy statement, I know. I've never said that about anybody in any sport ever. But it just feels so natural. He's from Minnesota. He was born and raised in Minnesota. He went to college, played college hockey in Minnesota. Now he's a Minnesota Wild member. This kid, and he's a great leader. He's very personable. This kid is going to be the next captain of the Minnesota Wild. Mark my words. If it doesn't happen, come troll this video. But I'm calling it now, only 5 games into this kid's career. He will be captain, which is just a ludicrous statement on the outside. But if you watch this kid play and know more about this kid, yeah, it's a matter of when. When is Spurgeon going to retire? So, and he's already debatably the best defensive player or defenseman on the Minnesota Wild. Probably up there with Brodin and Spurgeon, but nonetheless, all 3 players are at an elite status, which means the Fiala trade, if you're trading, the Wild had to trade Kevin Fiala. Great top 6 forward, very good 5-on-5 on the power play, can play some penalty kill, but they couldn't afford Fiala's contract. They traded him to the Kings for prospect Brock Faber, who was playing college hockey at University of Minnesota Twin Cities, the Golden Gophers, gets college hockey, and a first-round pick, which ended up being Daniel Yurov, who's lighting up the KHL over there. This kid's like 19. Should be in Minnesota Wild training camp to begin next season to compete for a spot, and he's projected to be a top 6 forward. When he was drafted, he was projected to be a second line forward. Now it's a top 6, and there's first-line potential there. So we'll see. It's too early to tell with that kid. But straight up, if you're trading Fiala for Faber, the Wild win that trade. You throw Yurov in there, I think the Wild won that trade. Again, still early for Yurov. It's still too early to say who won. You never know. But when this trade happened, I criticized the Wild because I thought they lost the trade. It was also too early to tell at the time. There's a video on this channel of me analyzing it, and I don't know. I thought the Wild could have gotten more than they did, but looks like they got 2 very young, strong prospects in return, and Faber is already panning out. Next up, Calen Addison. No secret that Calen Addison struggled defensively all of last season to a point where he was a healthy scratch for almost every single game to end the season last year. Just got a random email. That's fine. Preseason, his defense was a little iffy looking. I had questions. He was chasing guys out to the blue line still and leaving his defensive partner to have to deal with 2 and 3-on-1s. Questions. But in the regular season, through 3 games, he's been pretty decent defensively. He's not going to be an elite defensive player. He's an offensive defenseman. It's just is what it is. He'll be below average defensively, and that's okay because his role is to provide offense. But you also need a little bit of defense there. You can't just be like a forward that doesn't play any defense. But I think Addison, through the first 3 games, has played well on both sides of the puck. He's been responsible getting back into the defensive zone. He hasn't been taking too many risks in the offensive zone, getting lost up there and leaving his defensive partner exposed. So I think he's played well through the first 3 games. It's still early. He still had a rough preseason. We will see if this continues, and if so, that's really encouraging because then the Wild have a power play specialist on defense, and a guy that can play 5-on-5 NHL minutes. Not a lot of them, but can still at least play more like a John Klingberg, right? Next up, Connor Dewar is the 4th-line center for the Minnesota Wild. I think he's underrated. I would love to see him given a shot at a 3rd-line center role. It's tough. There's no spots on the Wild to move up Connor Dewar. He's behind. Who's he behind? Hartman, Eriksson Ek, Marco Rossi, or Rossi if you can roll your R's, and Freddie Gaudreau. And I guess Matt Boldy, but Matt Boldy's more of a winger at this point. Natural center, but more of a winger. But there's offensive upside with Connor Dewar. He's can play the grinder role. He can really fit into what style of play you need him to what player you need him to be. And he's done a great job at that. Great penalty killer. He's fast. He's physical. He's got a nice shot. He might be he's one of the better fourth line centers in the league. And there's offensive upside there. So I would love to see this dude given a little more of a shot, even more so than a guy like Brandon Duhaime, which a lot of people argue should be a third-line player at this point in his career. And there's validity to that argument. But Dewar has shown in the past that there's more offensive upside with him than a guy like Duhaime. I would love to see both of them on that third line. You get a third checking line that can maybe put up 20 goals. Maybe you put someone else with a nice shot like Freddie Gaudreau on that line. That could be a really interesting line. They don't have the roster spots to make those moves and to give these guys those types of opportunity. Speaking of opportunity, Marco Rossi through the first 3 games is still averaging under 13 minutes per game. I think he played about 13 minutes last night's game against the Montreal Canadiens. His line mates, Gaudreau and Foligno, are averaging like 14 to 15 minutes. Last night against the Canadiens, Gaudreau and Foligno both had somewhere in the vicinity of like 17 minutes. I don't know. Don't quote me because I don't have the numbers up. I think Gaudreau was like high 16s and Foligno was low 17s. And Rossi was 13. This dude needs to be given more of a shot. He's been very good this year. He's playing defensive hockey. He could have 3 points. His first goal in game 1 was called off. It was an offsides play by, I think Foligno was offsides. He scored another goal in game 2, and then I think in game 2 as well, he had another assist on the board, and then they took it off. So he could have 3 points. He could have 3 points in 3 games, point per game player in limited ice time. Obviously, he only has 1 point. It's just 1 goal. But nonetheless, he's played very well and deserves some more ice time. At the very least, like 14 to 15 minutes like a normal number 3 center, which is the position he's been playing. Has played some time on the penalty kill against the Canadiens. I think it was more of just like a let's try this out because we already have a big lead type thing. Would like to see him hopefully maybe one day on that first power play unit. I think he's had some time on the second power play unit, but hasn't really seen much power play time at all. I don't think we saw him on the power play at all I could be wrong. I don't think we saw him at all on the power play last game, even on that second unit. So I don't know. But it's just, now I have questions about Dean Evason. He really doesn't have a lot of faith in these younger guys. The exceptions to the rule being Matt Boldy and Brock Faber. But there's a bunch of other guys that probably should be given a shot, or at least more of a shot, like Dewar, like Rossi, like Brandon Duhaime, that really haven't been given that opportunity, even when they've shown that they deserve it. So I have a lot of questions with that. Is Dean Evason the guy for the youth movement? He likes his veterans. I don't know. Next up, Matt Zuccarello. I think he has been the worst performing player on the Minnesota Wild through the start of the season. And it's funny because you look at his stat sheet, he has 5 assists. I only remember one that happened last night. It was a great assist. I didn't remember any of the other 4 or when they happened. I had to look them up. He hasn't looked good. He's been a turnover machine. He's forcing, he'll drive up in the offensive zone. He'll be one of those situations where it's obvious, you need to shoot the puck in the situation, and he'll force a bad pass, it's not even close, causing a turnover, going the other way. His defense hasn't been all that great. He'll back check. He'll play some defense, but it's not good. He's not known as a defensive forward. He's not known as the worst forward in the defensive zone either. He'll play defense. It's just not going to be a high quality level of defense. I don't know. Sometimes it's just brutal to watch this dude skate around sometimes. I don't know, man. I don't know. I love the dude. He's a great dude. I understand why the contract was signed to extend him, not just to keep Kirill happy, but from a stats perspective, a play perspective over the past few years prior to his injury last year. Like the contract extension makes sense, but if he keeps playing the way he has the first 3 games of this year and the end of last year, that's a big red flag. We'll see. But I expect more from Zuccarello because he's capable of doing that. So we'll see. But that goes into the next. Kirill Kaprizov, he doesn't seem happy this year. He seems frustrated. Even going back to last year before his injury, they panned to him. He'd be smiling. He'd be goofing around. He'd be intense and focused and like full of fire and passion. But he'd also like, it's hard to not have this kid smiling all the time. And I haven't really seen him smile. I saw him smile once after he scored the goal off the Zuccarello assist, the one assist I remember from Zuccarello. Kaprizov smiled after that. Only when Zuccarello got to that pile. But Kaprizov looks frustrated. For a guy you're trying to cater, he's the cornerstone superstar of your team. You want to keep this kid happy. You sign Zuccarello to an extension to help keep him happy because they're friends. For someone you're trying to keep happy, he doesn't look very happy, and looks can be deceiving. It's a terrible thing to go off of. Like, that person looks upset or that person looks tired. Sometimes they're the way somebody's faces, their facial expressions, or the way they look, it doesn't actually match what their actual emotions or brain is thinking. So grain of salt with that one. But Kaprizov, I don't know. It's just weird not seeing him smile as much, and it's a little, on the surface like, I don't know. Next up, so the Wild played a man short last night, 11 forwards, 6 defensemen, because they had Goligoski go on the IR pretty close to game time. Boldy is on the IR and Spurgeon on the IR. And so they're so close to the Caps that they couldn't afford to call somebody up. But now they should be able to on an emergency basis. That person should be Sammy Walker. He showed all last year in the AHL he deserved a shot to play in the NHL. When he did play in the NHL, he looked like he belonged, and then had an extremely strong training camp and should have earned a job with the Wild in training camp, but didn't because there weren't any roster spots. It's one of those things. It is what it is. But he should be the first call-up. There shouldn't be any questions about it. That should happen today, tonight, tomorrow. I don't know. It's not on Cap Friendly though, and it's already 5 o'clock. But he should be the call up. He can slot in that middle six. He can fill in on that second line in place of Boldy. He could probably fill in. He's probably going to fill in on that third line, play with Foligno and Rossi. Gaudreau will probably slot up to that second line. But if they call up one of the guys like Vinny Lettieri or Juju Kyra or Fogarty, right? These guys are all pretty around at or just about 30 years old. It's concerning because you'll want to see the youth movement at least start to come to fruition. You trade for all these prospects. You really build up your prospect pool. You're taking your time developing them, and that's great. But at some point, they have to start making their way into the NHL and vie for roster spots. And this dude is already deserving of a roster spot. Obviously, he has to hold the roster spot once he gets it. But he hasn't been given really an opportunity to do that. So it should be Sammy Walker. If it's not Sammy Walker, I'm a little concerned. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I'm a little concerned if it's not Sammy Walker. Jack Pert, could see him at the end of the year as well. It looks like he's doing pretty well. He's playing, he's a defensive player playing at St. Cloud State. I forget if he's in his second or third year. So there's always a chance he might play another year because I don't know what year he's in because I don't know. Research, I guess, is too hard for me. Anyway, but this kid looked good. He had a really strong season last year with St. Cloud State. Off to a decent year this year. No points through 4 games. He's a -1. I don't know how St. Cloud State is this year. All I know is I hate their jerseys because they look like the Montreal Canadiens jerseys, and I'm a Bruins fan. So there's that. When I was in college, St. Cloud State played in my college in Massachusetts, and they had a good team, but we just booed them because they looked like the Montreal Canadiens, and it was a bad time. So there's also that. But Pert looks to be a very strong prospect, as was Faber. I don't know if he's going to be as good as Faber. Pert seems to be more of a defensive defenseman. But once the collegiate season ends, there's a good probability that Pert will end up somewhere on the Wild's blue line roster. We'll see. We'll see what happens with guys like John Merrill and Goligoski, and if Kalen Addison sustains the success or gets traded, or what kind of happens with that. But a guy you might be looking at the end of last year, kind of like what happened with Faber, is Jack Pert. So we'll see. That's my Minnesota Wild rundown through the first 3 games. Those are notes I've taken through the first week or so of hockey with the Wild. I think there's a lot more to talk about with the Wild that is, I guess, a little more subtle than most teams, but it's a lot going on, I guess. So let me know what you think. What do you think about any of these topics? This is kind of just I'm just going to throw random stuff on a board and talk about it with the Wild. So let me know what you think. Also, this is a sweatshirt. I know it looks really goofy and it's like thick and baggy. It makes me look huge. But I thought this was the coolest thing as a kid. I went through they came out with the hockey sweatshirts on the NHL shop when I was a kid. I went through 30 teams at the time. I thought the Wild one looked the best. My parents wouldn't buy it for me, which is probably a good choice looking back on that. 6 or 7 years ago, I finally got adult money. I was like, I'm buying this because I've wanted this for so long. And now I have it, and now I don't wear it, and, that's $100 for you. But that's the Wild. Let me know what you think. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, all right?